This week, Jennifer got in touch and told me she had some interesting material to show me, so I headed down to the Garrison Library to find out more.
I brought these books out today because every time you come we talk about a specific dish, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
But then I thought let's have a look at a number of the books that we have at the library. Well, just to see what they tell us about, in part, the collection, but also historically how food and drink has informed the Garrison Library, the people who use the library, and in part Gibraltar as well. I think I'd like to show you this illustrated London news first.
Okay.
Do you remember when we were talking about Calentita and about the Calentita cellar?
Yeah, we've seen the image of the,
We
with
saw
the
the
gentleman,
image.
the dish on his head.
Well, guess what I found? Have a look
Okay.
at this. Now, this is a street scene at Gibraltar, dated, well, the edition of the Illustrated London News is dated April 22nd, 1876. And here we have a Calentita seller with the dish on his hip. Actually, not over his head, but he's carrying it. So that's how far our Calentita seller tradition goes.
Yeah, so hundreds of years.
Yes,
Pretty
and
much.
I would imagine even before then, it's just that this particular image dates back to
And
1876.
even then, it's really nice to see the different cultures in the image.
We have military, we have, I think these are Moroccans. Fancy this, look, two people on horseback over here, looking
Yeah.
very smart indeed. And also, on the next page, chickens being sold in the market. And here we have also Moroccans selling the eggs. So isn't that interesting that we have a scene like this, very different to what you'd expect in Gibraltar's market now?
Definitely, yeah.
Because you have been down to the market, haven't you?
I have.
recently?
We don't get as fresh the chickens still live in the cages.
So it's a wonderful scene, I think. And I think you've already seen some of these books. You can see how the officers of the garrison are very interested in their wine.
Yeah, I've seen there's a few wine ones, especially some in
Yes.
French and some in
Yes.
English. And I think the officers must have had a very good taste back then, no?
Well, I wanted to know about good wines to be able to find them and drink them. I have to say, I mean, the Garrison Library collections are vast and very eclectic at the same time. And it's not like our collection on food and drink is great, but I think it's rather interesting in the focus on wine, gastronomy, but for very refined tastes. So maybe it's rather in keeping with the demographic, with the officers who would be using the Garrison Library and referring to these books. And there's this very interesting book. It's a very small book, and it's an almanac for gourmets. It's in French. It was published in Paris in 1826.
Wow.
And you see, look how interesting this lithograph over here. So it's a kitchen, and they're two men. So this isn't a cookbook for women at all. This is something else altogether. So we have two men wearing aprons, and they have all sorts of fowl and fish on the kitchen table. And here we have one stirring a hot pot on a stove. Very sophisticated indeed.
Yeah, all dressed in their robes.
In their robes.
And this pull-out, is this...
There's a map folded in, and this is a gastronomic guide in itself of France. And you can see here the different regions of France and the recommendations for best wine and food throughout France. So I think that a gentleman would carry this little pocketbook size, really, so it's a pocketbook, with him when he travelled through France to be able to then go and visit all of these taverns and restaurants along the way.
Oh, so it's nice to know that the officers that were here were very well travelled and like to
Well,
experience food elsewhere. And
I have to say that when we talk about food and when we travel because we want to go, say, to France or Italy in a sort of like a gastronomic trip to taste their food and wine, that it's something that was happening in the 1800s
Yeah.
already. It's not something of our...
Well, it happens now. The first thing that you hear when you come back is "Cómo estaba la comida?" How was the food? No matter where you go, it's always how was the food?
Yes.
What did you eat?
So I think this gives us a selection of certainly there's one over here on beer as well, a selection of the sorts of books that we do have over here in the library. There's one more thing I'd like to show you, and this is a photocopied sheet that we have. Well, it's actually a photocopied book. It's a WT operator's log. I'll tell you what it is. Look. I found this in the library when I took over just in 2011. It's very interesting. It's actually a cookbook. It's You see, you can barely see over here Recetas.
Yeah.
So it's a cookbook. Whoever it is has inscribed it in a WT operator's log. I don't know who it belongs to. I have no idea of its provenance, yet when we turn the pages, we have the most amazing recipes. Chula creme, which are eclairs, as you know, macaroons, la crema de moc.
Yeah, there's a lot of known recipes in here, no?
Yes.
It's quite interesting though, because it's written half in Spanish, half in English.
Yes, I think it's a bit sort of a la llanita, as we like to say over here. For example, half a pint de agua. And actually, it's interesting because then the method is written in Spanish. So I think clearly belonging to a Gibraltarian. Dos huevos, a quarter of margarine. Then she goes into the method in Spanish. And then again, over here we have cake the corn flour.
Cake the corn flour.
Because corn flour, I think, is maicena, isn't it?
I think so, yes.
In the recipe itself, 4 ounces harina, 4 ounces corn flour, 6 ounces margarine, 6 ounces azúcar, dos huevos, cucharadita de baking powder. So even the recipe, this makes me feel sure that we're dealing with a Gibraltarian.
Definitely, sounds like someone's granny speaking in half English, half Spanish. Let's just mix it up in there.
I think it's wonderful. I know that you've made some mantecados for one of the earlier programs. And look, here we have a recipe for mantecados de piñones. And I think the language is amazing. And go ahead and see what you think of this.
Some ingredients are in Spanish, you know, the azúcar, but then you get the pine nuts in English, and the way it says se trabaja la manteca y el agua. Very one-to-one. It's almost like my grandmother having her here and telling me, see, doing the rubbing method, so you can work the butter and the sugar together, and you can see their train of thought as they write it.
And really, an interesting thought is that this is a very personal document. It's written at home by somebody who was writing recipes for consumption within the home. This isn't a published book like many of the others we've been looking at today. And I think that makes it very interesting that here we have made this document public. In my eyes, it's a historic document, but we've made a very private recipe book that was written by somebody for the family consumption, for their own consumption, and we've now just brought it out into the open in a very public way. I think that makes this all the more interesting for us. So Justin, I think that maybe I'd like to take this opportunity, if I may, to use your program as a platform to be able to find out a bit more about this WT operator's log, which is really a recipe book, to find out really its provenance, where it came from, who wrote it. Really what I'd like to is to find a little bit more about this person, the person behind this book, the person who wrote these recipes. That person may be somebody's grandmother, great-grandmother, even mother. I mean, it's difficult for us even to place a date on this, but this is really what I'd like to know. Some more information about the person behind this book and understand the context for it a little bit more. Because this is a person from the past that is coming through to us today through her recipes.
Our final dish today is going to be a really simple croquetas dish. They're so great and fantastic to do because the croquettes, you can really use any ingredients on them. I'm going to make them with mashed potatoes, but you can also make them with bechamel. But you can pretty much add anything to it. I'm going to add bacon this time, but if you have leftover ham in the fridge, if you have, you know, an egg somewhere, some breadcrumbs and anything lying around, you can just have it. And particularly in the olden days, they used to do it at Christmas and Easter when you've got so much food going on and you know no one's going to eat that much food. You can use the leftovers and have some croquettes. If you see that in the fridge you've got food going off and you've made some sausages the night before, you've made something and you don't want to throw it away because the point of this dish is that we don't want to waste any food. You can just mix it all up in there, roll them up as we're going to do, and fry it, and you've got some really enjoyable croquettes and you've made the use of everything in your fridge. First thing you should do is chop up and fry your bacon and release those juices. And now is also a perfect time to put your potatoes to boil. We need to just mash our potatoes down. So about 3 or 4 potatoes should be enough for, I should think, about 3 or 4 people. And what you want is a paste that then you can manipulate and mold in your hands. Because what we're going to do is mix these with the breadcrumbs and with an egg so that we get a bit of a paste. And add in the bacon afterwards with everything. That's going to be looking really, really nice. We need to let this sort of cool down a bit first before we add the eggs. We don't want the egg to cook in our potatoes in here. So what I'm going to do is just empty this out onto our dish here. That way this will cool down a bit before we add the egg to it. Open this up so that cools down a bit. So we'll beat an egg in the dish. There we go. And what we want this is to be sort of not a very creamy consistency. Usually with mashed potatoes, we like to have very creamy, and we add the butter, we add the milk. But this time we want it to be a bit drier. So if you find that when you add the egg that it's too runny, you can add a handful of breadcrumbs. But not too much, because we need the breadcrumbs to then bread our croquettes afterwards. I'm gonna make a little hole in the middle there and pour in some of this. And then just mix it up. So that, for me, I think it's a good consistency to use. So I'll leave that there for a moment. I'm gonna break 2 more eggs in the dish, because we are going to roll these up in our hands and then do the same as we did with the chicken empanado, and the same as we did whenever you bread something. It's eggs, then to the crumbs. A pinch of salt in the eggs and a pinch of the pepper in the eggs. I will beat that in a bit more. And now this is nice and cooler, so you can handle it, and we're going to burn our hands off. Let's add in the bacon. We'll just add the bacon. Bacon chunks. You can use turkey, if you have turkey, ham bits, Spanish ham, anything is good, and everything tastes good. There we go. It's all mixed up. You can add a hand or pinch or a bit of breadcrumbs just to make it that bit thicker. You can also chop a bit of parsley if you want in there, or you can mix it with the egg. Just break it up and put it in with the egg. So this is ready. So we'll get a bit of your mixture, put it in your hand, and then simply roll it. Now, I've seen croquettes in every different shape and size. So you can have a ball, you can have a bit of a sausagey sort of shape, like that, or you can get it a bit flattened down. So really it depends how you prefer. If you've got smaller kids, you can mold them into smaller pieces, or you can have them the traditional sort of sausagey shape. So we'll put it in there, cover it in the egg, and then straight into the breadcrumbs. And this is one done. Brilliant. And that's how we'll go from there. And we'll do them all until you have enough that will feed an army, probably. So once you finish rolling up all your croquetas, we're going to go straight to our frying pan and put it there just to golden the outside and fry the bread out a bit, because really much everything's cooked already. One thing to know is that you can use the same oil as the chicken empanado. You can use the same oil that you used to make chips before, because it doesn't really matter. We don't want to waste the oil. It's all we're going to do is just fry the outside. So there, it's finished with some salad to give it a bit of color. Everyone can just enjoy this. Everyone can pick out, and I'm going to have a little bite here because it looks amazing. Buita bang, bit of bread. Yeah. Oh, that tomato is tangy. Chips are soft. Everything Everything's just too good. If we look in there, the egg still a bit runny. Perfect. So there you go, a typical trio of delicious dishes to share with friends and family. Or you could just eat them all by yourself. If you want to try these or other delicious local recipes, check out Mama Lottie's cookbook for dozens of Gibraltarian dishes, or visit the Mama Lottie's website, mamalotties.com. Don't forget to join us next week for another selection of yummy local recipes.